And that brings us to Agenda Bill AB number. What is that one called?
124.
124.
1 through 4.
124.
124. Okay, all right. Can you make that font smaller?
Large.
I need a telescope. All right, land acquisition for reclaimed water system improvements. Who's going to talk to us about this?
That's Andrew. Andrew's going to talk, and
is
I
Andrew
believe he's
on?
ready to go.
I'm right here. Yeah, I can take over.
Sweet.
Good afternoon, Parks and Public Works Committee. This is another reclaimed water improvements agenda bill. So this agenda bill is seeking approval of a purchase and sale agreement to acquire land and easements needed for the upcoming reclaimed water distribution system improvements planned at Ridge Street and Eagle Lake Drive. The draft agreement is included as Exhibit 1 of this agenda bill and is being reviewed concurrently by the property owner, Arcus Golf. The final agreement will be presented to council following receiving comments from committee and the landowner. So this agreement was prepared following several meetings and conversations with the city and the property owner. A detailed background of this effort is provided in the agenda bill, but I'm going to summarize. We prepared an engineering report during 2023 for the improvements, which included a siting study that recommended improvements being constructed within the property owned by the Ridge Golf Course. Following this, concept design permitting was completed and the site location was narrowed to a location, a portion of property located along Ridge Street and Eagle Lake Drive. The benefits of this site include its close proximity to the existing reclaimed water utilities along Ridge Street and within the BPA power easement, as well as visual buffering provided by adjacent trees and the natural ground contour. In addition to the land acquisition, the agreement outlines provisions for several project-related items, including a new access easement, temporary construction easement, private utility relocation, and work restrictions during the Boeing Classic Golf Tournament. The pricing in the agreement, $332,000, is based on property valuation and contractor bids. Prior to the land transfer, the 1 acre parcel will be subdivided from the larger golf course parent parcel, and approximately 300 feet of irrigation main will be rerouted around the parcel. Construction of the city's reclaimed water improvements is expected to begin summer 2025, such that the completion occurs prior to July 2026. With that, city administration recommends approving a purchase and sale agreement with the property owner for a contract value of up to $332,000. And I will take any questions about the agreement or this overall process.
Councilmember Cotton.
Yes, the question that I had was under the contract itself on the first page, item number 1, where it gives a description of the property. Item 1 property, that there was some, where was it? I had noted some misspelling. Oh, in under the paragraph lot Z, Snoqualmie, in parentheses, Snoqualmie Ridge boundary line. They've misspelled ridge and boundary.
They did.
Not that that's gonna affect the contract, I'm sure, but I mean, this will be spell checked before anybody signs it, right?
Yes, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Councilman? No?
How was the sales price figured out?
Several components to that.
Andrew, do you know that?
Looks like, Andrew, are you frozen, buddy?
Andrew froze.
Okay.
Okay, so we had a property appraisal done. We had a valuation done on the property. And then there was a little bit of back and forth with that, but you know, it was based off of a property valuation by a qualified land or property appraiser.
How far off from the appraisal was the final price?
For the first appraisal was, we felt was incorrect, and it was incorrect because they were valuing it to be some kind of like higher grade commercial property than it is. And we asked them to look at that, and they adjusted it based on our comments. Andrew could give you a better, deeper analysis than that, but we did, we feel pretty good that we got it right.
Okay.
Afterwards.
All right.
Yeah, because
So-
this is under the power line easement and not much you can do with the property, except for what we're doing.
It is outside of the easement, but it is right next to the
Okay.
easement.
And how much total area is it?
I think it says in there what the total area is. It is less than an acre.
It's 0.94 acres.
Okay.
And the price, it looked like the valued price was 209,000, and then the additional pricing was for some of the, moving one of the irrigation lines and some easement things and that
Right.
totaled up to the 332.
That's correct.
All right, hold on. Mr. Vining seems to think that he knows something.
Sorry about that. I think I dropped off there internet wise, but
We were
I-
discussing the pricing of the parcel and how it was arrived at. Mr. Hamlin told us that there was an appraisal, and then there was some back and forth on that. Anything else to add to that?
no, that's right. The price of the property is based on the valuation, the appraisal from a consultant, and then the relocating the irrigation line is based on contractor bids. I think Councilman Cotton had noticed some typos, which I corrected actually this morning in that first legal description. So we will get those all fleshed out.
Any other questions on this one, Councilman?
Yeah, was there any consideration that, we've got to redo this irrigation system? The person selling us, or the entity selling us the property, is the main beneficiary of our irrigation system. And if we can't do this, they get their water from God and he's stingier than we are. So is there any consideration in the price in regards to that?
I can answer that real quickly. The irrigation line that we had that they wanted to move, what currently runs under the property, it is their irrigation line, which comes from the pond, which is part of their irrigation system alone, not our joint irrigation system. So because they did not want to have their line running through our property, they wanted us to move that line outside of our boundary limits.
Was that a clever way to get a new line?
No, I mean, there was nothing wrong with that line. It was just that it went through the property that we're acquiring. And Andrew,
Yeah.
tell me,
Yeah, the line would be in a direct conflict with the new reservoir, so it needed to be relocated. Or it needs to be relocated such that there's no conflict in infrastructure there. We work closely with the city attorney on the appraisal amount, and generally you get the property appraised, and that's the value that you agree to is based on the valuation.
Okay.
Right, and I'm just looking for, again, if we don't do this irrigation system fix, they gotta look elsewhere for irrigation, so I'm looking for some partnership here. Understand the appraisal and all that, but, this project is to their benefit as ours. So, given that consideration, there's some wiggle room here. But all right, that's how you, calculate it out.
I would add to that the golf course has been very cooperative in this effort, with the realization that they do get all of their water from us. And, they support the project, or at least, they're not opposing it, and they're not making it difficult. They're not slowing us down or doing anything that I would say is underhanded or, not bargaining in good faith. in general, I think they've been a good partner to the city on this project. Andrew could probably, well, you can add anything there, Andrew.
I suppose to be fair, it is a project that benefits both the golf course and the city. So, Andrew, did you have something else?
I guess I just follow up on what Jeff commented that we started these conversations over a year ago when we realized that the site was definitely going to be located within that golf course parcel. And they have been a good partner in these conversations. And that this is for the city's portion of the reclaimed water. So while it is one utility, the improvements are really for the city's owned and operated distribution system.
Mr. Hall?
Yeah. No, I'm no further questions.
Okay. But just to tie a bow on this, you guys do not feel that the golf course is in any way taking advantage of the situation.
No.
Go ahead.
No, I don't believe so. They have been cooperative, I would say, right? So it's us coming to them saying that we need to do this. We want to, there was some discussion about the old pump station and maybe rebuilding that and looking into that. And they decided that they wanted to, build a brand new pump station for themselves and separate themselves. And that was a good thing for us. And that made it easier for us to make the decision to build our own new pump station next to our reservoir. I don't think that, they're not holding us up. We can't pay them less than the appraised value that I'm aware of. And they don't have any obligation to accept less.
The pump station that's on the golf course, is that golf course property or is that city property?
That is golf course property.
Okay.
Yeah. And they will not be rebuilding their pump station at that location. They want to move it across the street and put it in a different location. So that will become essentially surplused. And I believe the golf course will probably use it for storage.
Okay. All right.
So wait, I want to correct. I don't want to dwell too much on this particular, but I do want to correct something. If an entity wishes to transfer property to the city, we can accept it. We don't have to go out and appraise. And if I wanted to donate the corner of my lot down there that I can't really get a power cord to the city, I could do that. Okay, so the transfer of funds here has to be somewhere between 0 and what the appraised value is. You can't pay higher than the appraised value because then you are doing gift of public funds. Okay, but you can go lower than that as situations do. But understand where you are, how you got there.
All right. So then with this one, we move this forward to council. Consent or non-consent?
If possible, I would request that it's, well, not to interject, but this is a draft agreement. We would like to present the final one to council and prior to the next council meeting, our intention is to make it final. So just add that caveat.
Okay. Councilmember Cotton, Councilman Holloway, anything to that? Mayor.
Mayor Ross had her hand up.
Right, I have a question. So does the club know this pricing already? I mean, you already gone through and discussed it with them, right?
Yeah, the agreement, we've shared the land pricing several months ago, didn't get any pushback there. We did have these additional conditions, the terms and provisions that are listed out in the agreement. And then this agreement as it stands here was presented to them about 10 days ago, and we haven't received any comments from them.
Okay. And we're also going through some other real estate transaction, and what we've been informed by King County is you can't go lower than appraisal. So
That's a directive from King County.
yes.
Okay.
And there will be, I think, one during F&A today, another real estate thing. So. Fine.
Thank you for that information. Anything else? Mr. Holloway, were
Yeah,
you?
got a procedural thing. So this is the first open public meeting in regards to this agenda bill. The next will be council. So in my opinion, what that means is if you want to make revisions to this between now and council, you need to there needs to be a motion to substitute what is in this agenda bill today at council. Can't have the public document change between the two public meetings. That it just puts a bad light on it. Okay, probably nobody ever see it, but let's just not do it. Okay, so chair will probably have to do a motion, feed him the material. We'll have to do a motion to substitute.
Sure, we understand.
Could
And
we
we don't-
also, I assume that with that, you'd also provide us a list of any changes that are made in the document?
Yes, that's correct. And we don't anticipate any changes other than the ones that Council Member Cotton just pointed out.
Well,
with
she's
the
an eagle
spelling
eye,
errors.
so yeah.
But also, we have not gotten the official response from the golf course yet, although they've seen this paperwork and we've coordinated on it already. So I don't anticipate any changes, but we wanted to let you know that there was a possibility that they might come back with something. And then the council may have some additional changes here, or committee might have some additional changes for us. So that was why. And since Councilmember Cotton did point out the spelling error, that will certainly get fixed.
Okay. Mayor, did you have something else?
I don't. They already answered it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Then are we ready to move on, or is there something that we need to do? To solidify this one? Do we know how to proceed?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're good.
we bring it to council.
Could you stop flickering, please? It's really disconcerting. Okay, then let's move on to whatever it
Andy.
is Mr. Gamble's about to tell us about.
Okay, hi, good evening. So I'm going to kick us off into the utility rate study conversation once again. This is new for everyone, of course, and so, no, this is teasing, but I wanted to first say that Sergey and Paul, you should know that we have a good windstorm going on at our locations while a lot of our council members are on Zoom. And so just be aware that if we go out, it's probably because we lost power for a certain amount of time, and I just want to make you aware of that and some of the chaos in the world there. But I'm going to actually kick it to Sergey first to let him go on his presentation, and then I will follow up in the end for some final comments and some questions. So Sergey, would you like me to do the PowerPoint, or do you have it ready?
I have it ready, Dylan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And I've just shared it. Can you see the title slide?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Well, great. Well, I'll be quick to recognize the weather. We shipped Paul over to the East Coast, so if I go out, he'll be safe and sound, and he'll be able to continue the discussion. But again, thank you for joining us. We'll try to keep it brief today. Our focus really is regarding policy for our discussion, and we're going to be talking about rate design, kind of just to get a feel for where the committee wants to go in terms of kind of that last step of the overall rate study process, focusing on the monthly rates. So we did bring back background. I'm going to be going through it really fast unless you want to circle back and talk about those items. We just talked about these items last week, but again, I have no issue if we want to pause and discuss the council presentation we held last Tuesday. And really the focus will be on policy direction on the rate design. So just a reminder, we started last year. we did a fiscal health review. We started the study, and we've been working through piecing each component individually, going through revenue requirement, cost of service, and now we're getting to rate design. Just as a refresher, the scenario that we're circling around, and the reason why I'm bringing this up again is because rate design has to collect the dollar targets identified in the first two steps. So I wanted to again provide a quick refresher of the dollar targets we're going to be trying to recover through rate design. The scenario that we're talking about for revenue requirement was the kind of the one between the hybrid and the maximum debt alternative that focused on recovering about 46% of the total 3 utility capital plan, 46% through debt. We were looking at an average increase before cost of service, before rate design of about 12% for residential in the first year, followed by 6s and 5s thereafter. And for this option, we were looking at about $33.8 million of debt service. On the cost of service front, we have to dive in a little bit deeper into the water and sewer utilities. So looking at each individual system, we found that residential was within cost of service. On the water side, multifamily was paying a bit more than their allocated share of costs, versus while retail irrigation was not quite paying their share of costs. Based on this, we continued with the prior rate study recommendation of moving gradually towards cost of service, where anybody who was within the range of reasonableness was either right on the average increase, like residential, or slightly above if they still needed to make out ground, like commercial. Multifamily, because they were a bit above cost of service, they were paying more than their allocated share of costs, they were frozen in place at 0% adjustments to allow them to gradually get down to their allocated share of costs. On the sewer utility front, the same logic applied. The residential class and the multifamily class indicated that they were paying more than their allocated share of costs. Therefore, residential was increased slightly below average because they were really close. Multifamily received a big adjustment on the front end, allowing them to make ground towards cost of service, and then they were frozen in place in 27 and thereafter. Other classes made up the difference, with the commercial high class of service that needed to be increased the most. They saw the biggest adjustment compared to the average, and then future years were also a little bit higher than the average increase, trying to get them gradually towards cost of service over time. So again, this is information reviewed during the last meeting on the last Tuesday. Here, just bringing back the potential impacts using the current rate structure. So that if things held in place and all we did was apply the increases across the board proportionally to the fixed and variable charges based on the cost of service phase-in, residential customers would see an increase for all 3 utilities around 12%, followed by 6, and then a little under 5s thereafter, closer to 4.25 by the tail end. Multifamily would see 4.6, and then around 2 to 1% per year. Average low commercial customers would see similar to residential on the higher end of 12%, followed by 6.8 and then 5% thereafter. And then high commercial would see around 19%, followed by 9 and close to 7 and 6.5 thereafter. So this is, again, big picture. What could this mean to our customer classes? So to remind ourselves, we are on that last step, rate design. Steps 1, identify the total piece of the pie, the total size of the pie that we need to cover. Step 2, broke that pie down into slices and looked at how much each class of service needed to cover. And then step 3 gets into how do we actually assess it to our customers through the fixed and variable charges. So now what we're going to do is just to quickly go over the goals of the rate design. Again, number 1 goal is to make sure that the revenues that we bring in with these rates recover the dollar targets identified in the first 2 steps. After that, we need to take into account the goals and objectives of the community and the utility. That could include cost causation principles. So set our rates at the cost-based unit costs. You can also look at other goals such as conservation, affordability, sustainability, understandability. So there's a lot of goals that we can recover. So we need to have a structure that accomplishes the best goal that we want to for the utility as a whole. And that kind of brings us to the big picture, is that there's not really one rate structure that solves all the needs. Really, we need to figure out what is our top priority. What do we want to achieve through our rate design? And then we can align a rate structure that can help us do so. So as an example, if our goal is related to revenues and revenue stability, we would focus our efforts on the fixed charges. we would increase fixed charges potentially proportionally higher than we would increase our volume charges, because that would solidify how much revenues we get on an annual basis. If we're trying to do the opposite and focus on conservation, we might do the entire increase for water through the volume portion of the rate, or even decrease the fixed charge and then put a lot more emphasis on the variable component of the rate. Now that would reduce our revenue stability, but put a lot more control into our customers' hands from at least the water side perspective. That would reduce revenue stability, but enhance conservation signaling for higher users. Lastly, we also need to take into account simplicity and continuity. So again, the more changes we make, the more disproportionate impacts we're going to have. Even under a revenue neutral option where the revenue requirement is a 0% increase, the more changes we make within the class, there will be customers who will see an impact on like a reduction, and then there are customers who may see an increase. So we have to be careful and balance all these different changes that we're increasing, the average increase, the cost of service increase, and now we're layering on the last piece, the rate design. So on the next 3 slides, we just wanted to bring up the actual rate schedules that you're assessing to your current utilities and talk about some alternatives that we may evaluate. And depending on the complexity of the alternatives, it might take us a little bit longer to develop. So if we're looking at a simple option, we can be back in front of you pretty quickly. But if we're looking at recalibrating tiers and looking at seasonal structures as an example, that might take a little bit of time and may push us out a little further into the next year. So as a quick refresher, on the table to the left, you're seeing the summary of the rates for the water utility. The upper portion of the table provides you a summary of the monthly fixed charges. As you can see in the table, there are 3 different classes of service that the fixed charges vary. There's a different charge for residential, different charge for commercial, and irrigation. Every single class's charges do scale with meter size. So the bigger the meter size, the greater the charge. The multifamily customers pay a charge per unit that does not scale with meter size, but it does scale with the number of units that the apartment building or a multifamily complex may have. On the volume front, you assess rates on a 100 cubic foot basis, what we refer to as 1 CCF. 1 CCF is equal to 100 cubic feet. You are currently charging the volume rate for residential class based on a 3-block inclining tiered rate. And what this means is once you exceed a certain threshold, in this case 300 cubic feet or 3 CCF, you start to charge a greater charge for all additional units. So for the first 300 units, you charge $258 per 100 cubic feet or per 1 CCF. Anything above that starts to get charged at $4.34 from 300 to 800. And then anything above that, if you use even more than that, you start billing at about $5.42. And again, the nexus of this type of a structure is to incentivize conservation. As you exceed a certain threshold, you start paying for more, and it sends you a greater, faster pricing signal. Now, the pro and con around these type of conservation structures is that sometimes you may have families that have 1 person in the household, and sometimes you might have 5, 6, or more people in the household. And you're not necessarily being wasteful in terms of your usage. You're just a bigger family and household size, and you're using more water, but you're not being discretionary. And what we're really trying to achieve is target discretionary level usage. The positive reason for using these type of structures is that the usage for residential customers is fairly homogeneous. Majority of the customers kind of center around the bell curve, and there's not significant. There's still some variation, but not a very large variation of usage as you may experience in the bigger user classes like commercial and irrigation. Because of that large variation, we typically don't recommend tiered rates for larger accounts like multifamily, commercial, and irrigation, where usage per account can be substantially larger. So that's why the rates are shown on a per 100 cubic foot basis, per CCF. So a couple of items to get some input from you is, what are some of the changes that you would like to see? The quickest and the easiest change is to keep the rate structures as is and apply the increases on an across-the-board basis, where we look at applying the class-specific increase from the cost of service analysis proportionally to the fixed and variable charges. That would impact every customer proportionally. If it's 5%, everybody will get a 5% adjustment. The dollar value might change, but the percentage will be equal. The second alternative to consider is that we may want to start to look at, well, we want to incentivize conservation or revenue stability. So we're going to increase the fixed charges a little bit more. So that means we might increase the fixed charge 10%, since on an average 5% increase, that means our volume rates might need to go out, might stay flat at 0. So there's going to be a seesaw balancing act that we're going to have, because we know that overall we need to collect, let's say, as an example, 5%. But if one aspect goes up more than 5, and the other aspect of the rate has to go lower than 5%. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. What that means is that within a class, you're going to have different levels of impact. So some customers might see a decrease in rates depending on the magnitude of a lever we pull, and some customers might see more than the average increase. So this is where you're starting to get into the area of compounding increases from the overall average, cost of service, and now difference in levels of structures. That's one option to consider. The second option to consider is to recalibrate the tiers. We did look at historical usage information, and it looks like your average consumption still falls in line with the current 3-block structure. So the only really question here is, do you want to dampen the conservation message or enhance it, and how much? We can institute more blocks. It's not a common practice anymore. It used to be a little bit more common about 10 to 15 years ago. We could, some utilities have 5 tiers or blocks. That would be a little bit excessive, but it doesn't mean that we can't evaluate it or take a look at it. And the last option, as an example, we can look at a seasonal rate for non-residential customers, because that'll be a more common way to incentivize conservation. These are just examples that we wanted to get your thoughts on, or if you have any other requests that you may want us to take a look at and evaluate. So I'll pause here for this utility and see if you have any questions or comments.
So I have some thoughts. Councilmember Cotton, Councilmember Holloway, do you have anything that you want to say first?
No, go ahead. I'll go second.
Can you go back to the combined water sewer chart that you had there? I feel good about the way rates are allocated in this chart right here. So I guess my general sense is that if we feel like we've got that right, then it makes sense to me to go just across the board on the other I forget, I'm not using the right terms or anything, but the other thingy that Mr. Tarasov was just talking about. If we were generally across the board equal there, it feels like we've kind of we're attempting to achieve fairness in this portion of the rate study. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
this,
You say it better than I just said it, please.
this model does assume what we currently have, which is what Sergey showed you a couple slides ago, or slides forward, I should say, in that this is assuming a 3-tiered volume structure, and our current model of fixed rate charges and all these things. This is our current model. And so what we're kind of wondering is, do you want to deviate? If what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is you like how this is currently modeled, I would assume what you mean to say is that you're okay with the existing fixed and variable.
I guess what I'm concerned with is, non-water engineers fiddling too much with controls that when I guess what I'm saying is the combined rate study that we've or the combined table that we've already got together, that addressed my concerns.
Gotcha.
And so from my point of view, I think that it might be good to do less fiddling going forward. It feels like we fiddled here and came up with a good tune. And at that point, at least from my perspective, unless somebody feels particularly strongly about jamming serious water conservation, if it's yellow, it's mellow. If it's brown, flush it down kind of stuff on Snoqualmie, which I'm not particularly interested in doing, then it feels like we've done the majority of the work that we needed to do on this chart right here. But I'm absolutely open to anybody else's position.
Yeah, but this chart is pre-rate design.
Explain.
And I think it's the next chart you really want to look at for what is proposed as far as the impact of the rate design.
Do you understand what I'm saying though, Brian? That one of the things that we were concerned about was the equity of the bills, and it felt like we addressed that here, and then that was the main thing that I was concerned about. Do you have a bigger concern about the number of blocks of CCFs and that sort of thing than I do?
I don't know that I have concern. I have data, but I don't have information. Case in point, what I want to know is for those block 1, block 2, block 3, what percentage usage is block 1? What percentage usage is block 3? What percentage usage is block 3, 1, 2, and 3? So I can see what, kind of the curve of what's the forcing function for conservation. Okay. I don't know, what percentage of our users actually get into block 3.
Yeah, I think we can take a look at that information. Maybe Paul will be able to even look it up as we discuss. So we'll try to take a quick glance as you have a further discussion.
Mayor, did you have something that you wanted to say?
I do had a couple of questions. So the slide that we're looking at is this pre-rate design, but you indicated that this is using the 3 blocks. Is that correct? So this is the fixed plus the first.
Yeah, so what the way that you would be able to achieve this impact is to take the percentages from these slides and simply apply them across the board. So as an example, residential water is 575. We would go to this table. We would take residential, increase this 575, keep the blocks as they are, increasing 575. So doing that for every class and every element should get you exactly these results for a typical average customer. So applying the rates on an across the board basis would get you this table.
Okay, and then you showed just 3 blocks for residential, but do you also have blocks for commercial and for irrigation?
You currently do not. You typically would not recommend them just because the point of these type of tier or blocks is to incentivize conservation. And what you can typically get in commercial is that you might have a small business that wastes water, but they're small, and you might have a retail store that's very efficient, but they're large. So you're creating a tier potentially that's trying to capture different types, significantly different type of users within the same tier. So you're going to allow a small business customer to use as much as a large commercial customer, and they're being wasteful, and they'll stay in block 1, versus a efficient large customer might fall into upper tiers and be penalized, even though they're not being wasteful. Does that make sense?
But isn't that commercial high and then commercial low?
And sorry, the commercial high and low applies only to sewer. So we kind of tried to do a combined basis. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Cotton.
Yes, I was, I agree with, Councilmember, Benson, as far as I like how we've got the variable rates and, kind of gearing things like for the compensation of the multifamily and for those types of things. I also would like to see us do some kind of incentivizing for conservation. Absolutely, I agree with that. And I know even, for power, PSE sends out like when our flex hours are, and to try and not do things during the peak times, and that that type of thing, which, we can always include in a newsletter or whatever. But I did, on one of the slides, I think it was the last slide we were looking at the bottom, I did see a note that there was some notation, and I think it's because of for the city, it said something about senior and low income discounts. There it is. Low incomes, senior, disabled rates available. And the city does actually offer a 30% discount if you qualify. And what I want to put out there to our folks on fixed incomes is they just have to submit like the last year's income tax to, have a 30% discount apply to their utility bill. And so that's, that helps a bit as well too, besides all these other measures that we're taking. So I think I wouldn't say that we should go any more than the 3 blocks, and let's try and keep it as simple as possible especially for this council member. So we don't have too many variables in the mix as far as all of that.
Paul.
Yeah, I'm just, I ran some numbers to answer Commissioner Holloway's question. So looking at a 3-year average of water usage.
Hold on there, Paul. He's a councilman.
Oh, excuse me. We have about 37% of usage in block 1, about 34% in block 2, and then about 29% in block 3.
Okay.
So close to a third. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty evenly distributed then. Councilman Holloway?
On this chart, so that irrigation on the bottom, is that reclaimed or potable water irrigation?
This is potable, focusing on the water side.
Class A will show up in the sewer section, which is one slide next.
So
Okay.
reclaim falls under sewer?
You reclaim Class A, same, approximately the same intent there. Yeah, it's as part of the sewer system, so sewer utility, so to speak.
And then couldn't a similar thing as block 1, 2, 3, but given some consideration for the number of units on a customer, couldn't that all, it becomes complicated, well, a little more complicated because you have to keep track of how many units per customer, but couldn't you apply the same block methodology on multifamily?
So you could, I don't, currently, we would have to really work with utility billing. I don't think the unit information is readily available by account. But even if it was, there's a couple of considerations to make. The main one is that the customer themselves does not see the bill. They only get it, typically, they get it from their landlord. And there's not that direct nexus of a bill increase versus user that a single family customer may have. So single family customer uses, they can get a bill, they can adjust, versus landlord receives the bill and apportions it. If there's vacancies, that could be proportioned differently. So there's a lot more layers that come into it from that perspective. So the signaling of conservation through tier rates for multifamily is not as direct as it is for single family using the tier structure.
Yeah. So the intent of the blocking or the volume is really that conservation effort. And what Sergey is saying is there's not a very good way to translate that value of that benefit of having the variable charges to multifamily. It, like you said, it gets dispersed to landlords who then divide it across customers, and there's no way to really connect to that reduction in usage.
But if you're a couple and you're highly conscious about your water consumption and very careful about it, and you live next door to a family of 6 that is not, there's no way for the landlord to really reward you for your everybody in your set of units is going to benefit from your conservation, not necessarily you and your spouse.
That's a good
Unless,
example.
unless they sub-meter, which
Yeah.
is not very common at all.
Right.
There's no way to do that.
Right, right. So to me, that's an, yeah, I kind of like the way Ms. Cotton was describing it, where we encourage conservation through education and communication and providing ideas for ways to save water, because that is important. But to the extent that we fiddle too much with the way the bills work, I think, I mean, I guess it would work for residential, but it wouldn't necessarily work for everybody. Okay. Did you have more? Drew, did you have something?
And
No, I just want to, oh, yes, I do. The short of it is that if we do want to make substantial changes, just a reminder that we will need time to try to prepare what that modeling will look like, and because we're trying to control a lot of other things, right? So we've made a lot of assumptions to get to this point, and so you've seen the pre-rate charge model, right? So we have to divide that to make sure everything looks right. If it's a pretty big departure from what we are seeing here, it will take some time, and just kind of want to tie back to the whole timing of the utility rate study. Since it's mid-November now, we're already looking towards a January adoption of rates, and that means we're going to be 1 month in or late on the rates. So all this has some timing consequences, and I know that's not a ideal thing to mention, and I would ideally like to have lots of time and possibility to go over, but I just wanted to bring that reality back.
Well, I don't know necessarily where Councilmember Cotton or Councilmember Holloway fall, but my general sense is that more time to fiddle with this and adjust this would be counterproductive. And it seems to me like we've arrived at something that looks pretty equitable, and my vote would be to fiddle with it as little as possible at this point. Mr. Boutte.
So I was just gonna provide some comments overall regarding my perspective on this. So we're pretty much trying to balance this along a continuum. So on one end of the continuum, you have more conservation. On the other end of the continuum, you have more revenue stability. Pricing is a way to really incentivize the public to conserve more. We're attempting to conserve more, potentially to hold on to more water rights or generate more water rights and things like that, so that we're not using so much necessarily or running up against of what our limit is overall. This may be a very effective way for us to accomplish that. I'm not sure because we haven't gone through that before, but probably not. But maybe it's a tool in the toolkit that we could apply with potentially others to help with that effort overall. When it comes to revenue stability, we do know that as a part of this utility rate study, we have a CIP that's going to have to be funded by revenue bonds basically over the period of time, over at least the next 10 years or so, to support the capital improvement plan. Those revenue bonds, if we do happen to issue them, will come with fixed debt service payments. You need a stable revenue source in order to fund those fixed payments. If you start tinkering with, creating more of a volumetric charge, reducing the fixed charge, for example, you're more open to changes in seasonality impacting the revenue that you collect overall, which could make that a little bit more topsy-turvy in terms of our ability to fund, I believe, the bonds that we seek to take out over the next 10-year period or so. So over time, the council has generally decided, I think, to err on the side of caution a little bit more, move towards more revenue stability. Certainly when we went through the last utility rate study, we didn't really change the rate design at that time. We just did across the board increases as well. But if we're looking to really kind of conserve, make sure that we've utilized this tool in the toolkit to ideally make sure that we've got sufficient, water to be able to support maybe the development that's coming in the future that could generate operating revenues that would support the general fund and so on, you could potentially apply this here today. The next opportunity for us to really consider conservation measures when it comes to the rate study would probably be the next time in which we bring this back, which could be 2 or 3 years from now, but 4 years is, I guess, what we're attempting to do. But anyway, so just some thoughts for you guys' consideration. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other comments? All right. I think you're speaking my language. My general life philosophy is do as little as possible. And it sounds like that's at least where I'm at on it. Go ahead, Mr. Holloway.
Chair, I have some umbrance with that. I believe this conversation is the correct conversation to have. So follow that up with, it's a good question to ask, but don't ask me a question, then tell me not to do it. Okay, so I will take the time to try to understand what's going once you ask the question. And if it takes longer, it takes longer. Okay, these rate studies can be enacted when we need to. Okay, so I'm ruffling a little bit, but again, I also agree. I'm not sure there's a lot of tweaking that needs to be had here. But I am going to take the time to ask the question so I can understand and feel good, comfortable that that is where we are. So
Well said.
I'm done.
Councilmember Cotton, anything else on this one? Okay, so what's the next step here, Dylan?
Sergey, take us right into the wastewater.
Yep. So water, again, same question for sewer utility. It would have to apply the same logic, but on this utility, the predominant charges are fixed in nature. Only the commercial rate has a volumetric component, which is higher for the high commercial class and is assessed on, again, 100 cubic foot basis or per CCF. There is a built-in allowance of 6 units for the commercial class. So the first 6 units are not currently being billed. They're included, you can say, in the fixed charge. Anything above that is being billed. So some of the other alternatives that can be considered, because there's other classes don't really have a volume component, is to actually introduce a volume component. Not to say that is the proposal, that's just an option for you to consider. When folks do that for residential customers, they usually use winter average water because you don't typically install deduct meters or outdoor usage meters for residential homes. There have been utilities that have done that, but it's very costly to do so, and it's cost prohibitive to have 2 meters in the house. So you usually would try to approximate what goes down the drain and not down onto the lawn or washing a car. So usually using a winter average does a pretty decent approximation of folks' contribution to simply using the sewer system instead of irrigating. So that would be the main kind of big change that you can consider. The other option is tweak their commercial fixed and variable change, but really there's not as many alternatives that you can consider on this utility.
Any comments? My
No, I mean, trying to force conservation at this end may drive
say
strange
that again. I'm
behavior.
sorry, I missed what
Trying
you
to force conservation at this end at the sewer rate may drive some undesirable behavior.
We'll save water, but we'll get typhus.
Yeah, and again, considering we don't really meter the sewer, we base it off of water usage for the sewer rate. Your conservation force on the input, not the output. I have no desire to drive conservation in the sewer rates.
I'm trying to figure out which one's input and which one's output. Because it's
To the
all
residential house, water is input, sewer is output.
okay. All right.
Any other comments before we go to the last one? No.
I think we're ready.
And the last one is pretty straightforward. Stormwater utility is typically assessed on impervious surface units based on a typical residential home. there are some utilities that look at density of development, how much is impervious versus pervious. But again, that data would have to be aggregated, processed, and I don't believe the city has that information to even consider the density of development alternative at this time. So really the option is to continue charging on an ESU basis. You could do per account, which would be a significant shift of reallocation of costs, and it's not going to be as equitable as the current approach per service unit.
Do we keep track of the percentage of surface that's impermeable on properties?
There, so yeah, sort of. There is a development review process for most properties that they go through a impervious surface on a lot percentage basis. And so a lot of the ridge came about later. They actually have a lot of density information for that. But a lot of the, I guess you'd say the downtown Snoqualmie does not have that data unless it was collected as part of some sort of big remodel or something like that. But it's not, I don't believe it's the same kind of data that Sergey is referencing. What I mean is it would take a lot of work to translate that into a new charge rate pattern for a stormwater charge. It would be quite a departure from the data we have, I think.
Yeah, there's formulas. So in developed areas based on the density of the development. So, say 3 dwelling units per acre, right? That's a medium density. There are general rules of thumb that you can apply when calculating impervious area, meaning mature neighborhood, 3 dwelling units per acre is going to have an average of about X percentage of impervious area, per acre. So you can readily find that information and apply that as needed.
All right, I'm not seeing any hands.
So really, that's pretty much it. That was the main feedback because there's so many directions that we can take redesign, and we really wanted to get your guidance before we dove into a direction that you may not have wanted to see. So just based on preliminary hearing, and please do correct me if I misinterpreted, the primary desire is to focus on the overall revenue collections in the first 2 steps, as we have identified and presented them, because some of the impacts are already pretty moderate to our customers. We're not proposing any changes that would deviate from the current structure. But do let me know if I misinterpreted any of the guidance.
Well, I did get the sense from Councilman Holloway that he is interested in looking at the possibility of incentivizing conservation. But correct me if I'm wrong, Brian.
No, but I have no desire to tweak the model as presented. And we've got the 3 tiers in residential. You assume in multifamily that it averages out. The only other, sometime we may want to look at if somebody wants to put a rain garden in, can we give them a cut on stormwater? But I'm not proposing that get folded into this conversation now.
Councilmember Cotton?
Yeah, I think of all the points that have been brought up by various aspects and, from the council members to, Sergey's information and of course our finance director's input as well. I think, probably the major incentivizing for conservation that at this point might just be, like I was mentioning, putting information in the bulletin or on the website, on how to do it. But I'm not sure that that's going to, profoundly affect things except for those, like you said, those people in the residential portion that can affect their own input on that. So I'm not recommending making any big changes to the current structure that we have in place.
Yeah, I think I only have my gut to go off of, but I think that in general, our citizens aren't looking to waste water. And that in order to increase conservation, if our only lever to pull is punitive pricing, I think it's going to do, I don't know that it's going to do the good that that we'd hope for, at least not outweighing the bad. Mayor, did you have any more thoughts on this?
I don't right now, thank you.
All right. If there's nothing else, Sergey, thank you so much for your careful analysis. It's really helpful.
Thank you for your time, and stay away from the wind.
I do some follow-ups.
Go ahead,
That are
Mr.
kind of
Gamble.
unrelated to this presentation. Well, or very related to this presentation. What I mean is not a follow-up directly. So with regards to timing, we will work with the FCS group to turn around a model that kind of showcases what we've talked about here tonight. I just
Hey,
want
can I ask you about that real quick? Because I'm getting the sense from you that timing is really important. And Mr. Holloway's comments were that they don't have to be the primary concern. Can you explain to me your focus on timing?
Yes, yeah. So the major thing with regards to timing is that Councilmember Holloway is absolutely right in that we do have a rate study that exists, or a model that exists now, and our charges will go up. However, the current model that we've been working through does have a higher percentage increase. The difference between that increase is what we will be missing the longer we delay, so to speak. So if I believe the current rates have like an average increase of, let's say 2%, but we're proposing 7, then we're going to miss 5% per month. And that will decrease the revenue for these utilities. That's some percentage of risk. I just want to mention that. As we go along, I'm just trying to make sure that that's still there, front and center. But Councilmember Holloway is right in that you should take all the due diligence you need to feel comfortable with the models we're presenting. I do have some other notes to kind of tie into that, which is, as you probably heard, we have a conversation about GFCs or CAICs. And what these are is essentially how we charge developments when they come into the city to pay for some of the CIP projects. As you've kind of heard me allude to, and we've discussed in the CIP, we don't really have any developments planned for the next few years. No major growth that we would be charging people to kind of pay. And so we have no major service connections and things like that. With this in mind, I would like to propose, and as long as with the administration have kind of gone over the ramifications here, and we'd like to kind of delay the GFC conversation and prioritize the rate structure, given that we have some headroom, or not headroom, some lead time before the GFCs would ever be collected in the first place. So that's a proposal, a way to kind of try to get those rates as quickly as possible and as quick to January 2025 as possible, and then target the rates right afterwards, or as simultaneously as we can, but to deprioritize and kind of detangle them. And what that, in a sense, would do would allow us to get the rate structure set in place via ordinance, adopt the utility CIP, and then we would follow up with the GFCs to make sure that they're tracking exactly with the adopted CIP, and we would adopt a new ordinance to get those in place as well. So that's one option that we have, and I'd like to propose it and make sure there's no concerns with that. The major concern would be that if we had a development show up, which I'm not aware of one that would be able to collect a GFC charge by January, with some small exceptions of a hookup on 384th, I think is one example, right? So if we have a 384th that's got a new sewer main, there's people that were previously on septic. If they were to connect to our system, they pay a GFC charge per the size of their meter, water, or if it's sewer, they pay a similar GFC charge, right? That's like the example of the ones I can foresee in the next little bit that we would be in theory missing out on the difference. But again, we're charging a GFC, and we will increase our GFC amount, but it might not be by the amount that we're going to charge by. That's, I think, the major risk there. But given the kind of timeliness of the rates, I wanted to propose that and make sure that that was okay if we proceed that way.
Thoughts, Councilman?
But there is even in the rate study, there is some assumption of how much of the future capital costs are going to be paid by GFC and how much are going to be done by rates.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you take at least a cursory look, and if you do that split wrong, you could whack the GFCs. You can get them out of whack. So as long as you do a cursory look, I got no problem doing the GFCs later. Just don't totally ignore them so that when we finally get to them, they come out looking, oh my God, I don't want to charge somebody that.
Right.
Yeah, that's my only concern. They're not independent of each other. You can enact them at separate times, but the rates and the GFCs have an underlying cost is paid by GFC.
Do you want to comment on that?
Just simply that, yeah, absolutely. We are very aware of that. I mean, we built a lot of the model and the CIP after that. So we've been trying to be very diligent of this. I know exactly what you're referencing, and we will do a quick check-in as we do kind of our initial look into the GFCs and verify that. We already have, just to a major extent. I just felt that the loss of revenue from the rates not being collected is a guarantee. The GFCs are much smaller risk and are further out. And we would give ourselves some grace period to kind of make them very accurate and appropriate to the CIP, which we would hope to adopt as well. So,
okay.
But yes, I completely understand those comments. And
Well, it sounds like the strategy is also addressing directly what Councilman Holloway is talking about getting the GFC rate just right.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than, yeah, okay, all right. Councilmember Cotton?
Yes, so it sounds like from what Dylan was saying is that the GFCs is right now is just more of the kind of the straggling of the sewer hookups on 384th versus there's no like commercial developments in the works that would, you know, have a significant impact on that. So that dealing with the rate increases first, and then the follow-up with looking at the GFC seems appropriate to me.
Yep.
All right. Anything else?
Yes, one last one with that wrap up, and that would be that with kind of some administration review of staffing levels, we're going to request that the wastewater, there's 4 positions in wastewater that are assumed in the models that you've seen here today. That's 2 positions in 2025 and 2 in 2028. And we are suggesting to remove the 2028 positions. And I guess I can leave it on Jeff to kind of go into the details.
Can anyone hear him?
No. And the
Yep.
power flickered.
Something happened over there. Hold on.
Okay, lecture's on. Thank you.
It's just good to see that when my lights flicker, their lights flicker. It's not just me.
I think Drew, if you guys can hear me, we can't hear you anymore. Can you check the computer, make sure that the output is on that echo? Yeah, we could see you, but we can't hear you.
Make big hand motions. Maybe we can get an easel whiteboard in there and they can start drawing and we can start guessing.
Fortunately, I don't have a remote agent in that computer, so I can't remote in and adjust it.
Can you hear me here?
We can
Yep.
hear you.
Okay.
Kat says she can hear you.
Okay, so I turned my computer laptop microphone on, so as soon as Drew figures out how to get the rest of it turned on, it'll be very loud. I don't think this helps because we cannot hear you in this room.
How much more is on our agenda, Ms. Dean?
Director report.
Director reports are the final thing. on the agenda.
I'm gonna make, can you, I'm gonna make a motion that we adjourn, because I'm not sure that we can legally continue if we cannot hear one another. It doesn't seem like that, really constitutes a quorum. So, can I get a thumbs up if you, okay, all right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.